是这样的
啊，已经
？OK，I
已经
don't know 不知道。
不管它，这很难懂啊。
是啊，我现在变成这么大一块都被挡住了。
没有啊，我看全部很好啊。
你们都看到啊，那就好。可是我现在有6个小方块，所以都占掉我很大一块地方。刚刚开始的时候不是这样的。
那你还要到 view 那边去弄。
也啊，是啊，可是我就是不会我选这个 view 的地方，他就不告诉我。哦，有了，现在变成这样。哎，这样很好啊，我来试试看。今天就这样吧。现在好像刚刚开始，他已经开始 stream 了哈，那我们就开始好了。谢谢大家今天来上课哈。本来昨天天气还不错的，今天又不行了。
明天会好。
不过至少不太冷就是了。Okay, let's start. We're starting with today, March the 2nd, and we talked about something else last time. I mean, two weeks ago, but I always meant to choose the临终诗 Let me see. That's why I'm choosing it now, even though it was quite some time after the first episode of 临终诗. Let me go through this one quickly. This is just to say that we are here at 2 p.m. Pacific time in Seattle, and every first and third Wednesday of the month. And it is being streamed live on YouTube right now, and the recordings is available on YouTube later. Today, our topics are, for the sound I chose, When the River Meets the Sea. I heard it as a John Denver song, but it turns out it was not originally his song, and it was not written by him. Even though he wrote many of his own songs, lyrics and the music as well. This is When the River Meets the Sea. It is about the time that a person is going to die. It's like the river flowing all this way, and at the end, it joins the sea out there and is lost to his previous world. And it is to the next world. 就是下一个世界，就是你死去的那个世界哈。So it's a song about passing, and it's a very peaceful and a beautiful song. And it was sung by the Muppets. And we're going to talk about the Muppets. And to match that, I chose a song when Su Shi was facing his death. Well, he did not know exactly when he's going to die because he's not being executed or committing suicide or anything of the sort. He just felt that he was old and not in good health and could die anytime. So he wrote this poem we call the 临终诗. At the time, we're going to present to you several other 临终诗 written by famous Chinese poets. And in the process, we're going to mention some other topics: missionary, the revelation, and Jim Henson. When I sent out the handout, the revelation was not here. I just added this morning because I thought it occupied quite a portion of today's talk. Okay, so let's start with the vocabulary. We have a list of some more than a dozen, but less than 20 words, and we'll go through them. And I did not choose to talk about any news. I could, but I did not. Of course, the biggest news nowadays is the war, the invasion of Russia of Ukraine. Maybe we'll talk about that. It's a complicated issue, and to most of the people, it was really unfair for Russia to invade Ukraine, and we'll probably talk about it next time. I only have one thing to mention that's not on this list, that is a word frame, because last time I spent a lot of time on the word frame, and we talk about how many things that this word means, and it's verb and noun forms, and the word reframe, and so on. But I forgot to mention the very common way it was used. It is used to describe our body. Mainly when we say our skeleton, it's just a set of bones, but when we say a frame, then it includes the bones and the muscles and everything else. So it's like the frame is a thing that we attach our head, our eyes, our arms, and our legs to this frame. So this is a frame that also means a person's body. And I came across this line in the Divine Comedy in the past 2 weeks. That's how it jumped into my mind. And because I was talking, or I am going to talk about the Divine Comedy, so I went on Amazon to buy for $0 the book, The Divine Comedy. I'd like to tell you about how you do that. You know, Amazon started as a bookstore, so you can buy books, real books from Amazon, but later they have ebooks, which is books on your computer or on your other devices, which you can read those books just like you're reading a book, but they're very light. Each book is weighing 0 ounces. So when you go out on the trip, you can bring a lot of books with you, and you only need to have a device with you. In the beginning, Amazon sells Kindle, which is an ebook device. But later on, it becomes a huge store. You can buy anything from Amazon. You can still buy real books, but there are lots of ebooks you can buy. And for me, the best thing is to go on Amazon to buy ebooks that are free. You just look for free books, and there are thousands and thousands of them. You don't have to pay anything, and you can buy a book. And this is partly because of copyright. When the book is old, it loses the copyright. So anyone can print such books without paying the author anything. Because of this, there are a lot of free ebooks out there you can read. But the easiest way to read is on Amazon, on Kindle. And you buy an ebook on Amazon, and it costs you nothing, and it comes to your device immediately, and you can start to read. And of course, most of these books are very old, but it doesn't mean they're not good. They are actually very good. For example, Greek mythology or Aristotle's books, or this one is by Dante, Dan Ding, Divine Comedy. And you can read just endless books. Any book that's more than 100 years or more than 50 years old, you can possibly buy it for free. So I have a lot of such books. And the last time I talked to you about the Divine Comedy, so I decided to get out my Amazon free ebook and look at it. And lo and behold, on the second page of this 652 pages book, I found this term. It says my weary frame. That means Dante mentioned that he looked at himself and he felt very tired. And that's how he came about to write this book about the divine, and titled The Divine Comedy, in which he went to the underworld as if he died. He went to the underworld and he went to the inferno, which is Satan's hell, and he went to a purgatory, which is a place between heaven and hell, paradise and hell. In between, it's called the purgatory, 炼狱. We Chinese translate that into 炼狱. So this book is about a trip undertaken by this poet through the different levels of the other world. And in this story, he met with a dead poet whose name is Virgil. Virgil 我们叫做魏吉尔, a very famous Italian poet. So Dante and Virgil got together and embarked on the trip to the Inferno, to the Purgatorio, and to the Paradiso. That's the story of the Divine Comedy. So now let's start with the vocabulary. The first word is miscarriage. Miscarriage happens spontaneously, which means it happened without human control. It just happened naturally. So this is the death of a fetus that happened naturally. So it's different from abortion. Abortion is an artificially induced procedure. So a woman could be pregnant and then she lost this baby, unborn baby. It's a fetus, F-E-T-U-S. And if it happened without her planning or anyone's planning, it just so happened, then it's called a miscarriage. And if she had something done, whether surgically or by taking some medicine or for whatever, there are many ways to cause it to happen. And that's called a procedure called the abortion. So a woman having an abortion is to have something artificially induced on her in order for her to lose the baby. Okay. But these two words are obviously different, but you can compare these two words so that you know the difference. But both of these words were used outside their medical meaning because it has a very special meaning to it. So we use that word to apply to our other daily lives. For example, there are two sentences, for example, below. One is, it is a miscarriage of justice. So if justice was not carried out, then we say justice suffered a miscarriage. So it should be carried out as if a woman delivered a baby, but it did not happen. Halfway through, it was lost. So we call that was a miscarriage of justice. And abortion, the word abort is also used in a similar way. We had to abort the operation. For example, if General Eisenhower was going to launch the D-Day landing, then something happened. And for example, the intelligence was leaked and the German army was already well prepared for this landing, then they may have to abort the operation, which means even though it's well planned in detail, they had to give that up, abandon that operation. So it's very abrupt, and we do it very reluctantly. We say we had to abort the operation. So these two words, miscarriage and abortion, are used not in the process about a woman having a baby, but in our daily life, it's quite often used. So it's good to learn these two words. Our next word is missionary. It means a person or several people or a group of people who are a member of a religious group, and he or they were sent by the religious group to a faraway place to spread, to promote their faith. So in Chinese, we call it 传教士, huh? A missionary is such a person. He believes in a certain religion, and most of the time it is a Catholic Church. And he went to a faraway country or continent, for example, to South America or to China or many other places, which is not where he used to live. And he was sent there to try to convert people. Convert meaning a person who did not believe in your faith, but because of your encouragement or persuasion, that person decided to change his belief into yours. So that is what convert, the word convert, the verb convert means. In this process of trying to convert other people, they also would provide other services to these people in order to convince, to change the people's mind. The services could include education, literacy. Literacy is to教人认识字, huh? Education encompass a much larger area of expertise. It means not only to teach people to read, but also other things, to teach people to sing or to learn other things, or to well, it could be learning a skill or learning a whatever knowledge. So education means a lot more than literacy. Literacy is just to teach someone to be able to read. And the missionary could also provide social justice, healthcare, and economic development. With all these things, they were able to get into the hearts and the mind of a new country, a new people, and to convert those people into their religion. That's what a missionary does. There are people who do these things throughout history. Just as far as Christianity is concerned, they had a missionary from since the first century. Huh? Jesus Christ was born when the first century comes. So he was in the first part of the first century. And ever since he died, or even before he died, there are people, religious people who believed in his teaching, going about teaching other people and trying to make other people convert to Christianity. But the word missionary was not used until 1598. So before that, there are missionaries who went to, for example, from Rome, they would go to England or to France or to Germany to try to teach people the teachings of Jesus. And they also went the other direction to Eastern, Near East or Far East, to many other areas, for example, Armenia and Georgia. These are all countries where there were priests who went there to try to teach Christianity in the very early days, in the 1st century, 2nd, and the 3rd century. However, it is after Columbus went to the Americas. He was Italian, sent by or sponsored by Spanish monarchy to first to the Caribbean, and then the people after him went all over North and South and Mesoamerica to try to spread Christianity, and that was since 1492. And in the year 1598 came along the Jesuits. The Jesuits, they are a group of people whose main goal was to preach, to convert, to go to other countries where people did not know Christianity, and to spread this religion. And about 100 years after Columbus, there came along the Jesuits, who are the missionaries, who are the members of the Society of Jesus. The Society of Jesus is called the 耶稣会 in Chinese, and this association or this denomination of Christian church was started in the 16th century, and they gained a lot of force, and they were acknowledged by the Pope to be part of the Catholic Church. And in 1598, when the Catholic Church sent out Jesuits to all over the world to spread the religion, they decided to call them missionaries. So even though there were missionaries for more than 1,000 years, the word missionary or mission were only coined in 1598. And it was from a Latin word, which means to send. So mission, right now we still use the word mission to mean your targeted goal, to mean a mission. But when this word was started in 1598, it means the Christian church sending out people to faraway places to preach Christianity. Okay, I did not know that. So here I have an icon or his Christogram. So it's a logo of Society of Jesus. It says IHS in the middle, which means Jesus Christ. It's the name of Jesus Christ. It's the first 3 letters of the word Jesus, and it was spelled as IHS or in some other form, a Greek letter. But now that the letter I is J in English. So if you look at this IHS, you could not tell it means Jesus, but it is. The Society of Jesus the Jesuits is a religious order of the Catholic Church. It was founded by 6 people. The foremost among the 6 people is Loyola, and his full name is Ignatius of Loyola. And when I was working 30 years ago, my supervisor, who was a woman, and her first name is Loyola. Loyola became a girl's name because it looks like a girl's name. When you say a girl's name looking like a girl's name, it means you look at it and the last letter is A. And if the last letter is A, 99% of the names are girls' name. So Loyola is a man's name, but later on, when many Catholic families naming their newborn girls, they would like to choose the name Loyola, even though the original Loyola is a man with a big beard. He and the several friends of his, they formed it's not a club. I could say society. They formed an association called the Society of Jesus. And as always, when someone within the Catholic Church formed any kind of movement or association, the Pope is not happy. The Pope is against them and wanted to persecute them. However, after a few years, because it became so popular and so loyal to the church, to the Catholic Church, that Pope Paul III decided to approve the Society of Jesus. So since 1540, the Society of Jesus was approved by the Pope. It became a part of the Catholic Church. And this group of priests, their main goal is to preach or to evangelize people and do apostolic ministry. Apostolic is an adjective describing apostles. So Jesus Christ has had 12 apostles. So those people, plus many, many others after them, were spreading the Christian faith. So they're called to be engaged in apostolic ministry. 就是从事于传教的工作. The word evangelization also means to preach, to spread the faith. So these are all words that are used to describe the mission of this Society of Jesus. And right now, at this moment, they have missionaries in 112 nations in the world. Since 1540, they have been going to many corners of the whole world to try to spread the faith. Okay. As far as China is concerned, we first had Matteo Ricci, Lima Do, who was a Jesuit, and he went from Italy and France and Spain. He was in those 3 countries, and finally he was sent by the Society of Jesus to Macau. He went to Aumen. That was his first place of ministry. But later on, he went to mainland. Of course, Macau is still part of mainland China, but it's really on the border by the sea in the south. So he eventually went to China. He went to Beijing, or we say Peking at that time, and he was given an audience by Ming Dynasty Emperor Wanli. So that was how Christianity first reached China by a Jesuit missionary called Martel Ricci. And they did it in many similar ways in the entire North America. You know, there are 21 missions in California. They were built by the Spanish Jesuits. When I went to California, I went to many of the Spanish missions. But before that, on my way back from Yellowstone, because it's too far away from Seattle, on our way back, we stayed in a hotel in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And before we arrived there, it was just right after lunch. So we went to a local state park, and that was the state park in Idaho that had a Spanish mission, that had the Jesuits mission set up by the Catholic Church in, I don't remember what date, but maybe 17th or 18th century. Okay, so they were everywhere, huh? They were in North America, and of course they were in the entire Central America and the entire South America, everywhere, every country, including the Caribbeans. There were Jesuit missionaries. However, they are not as popular now. Before them, there was what's his name? Francis of Assisi. Assisi is a town where Francis was born, and Francis of Assisi, much earlier than the Jesuits, he established a branch, a denomination of Catholic Church. They're called the Franciscan Church. So when Francis of Assisi established his brand of Catholic Church, the church was not happy either, but he became enormously popular. So the church decided to take him into, approve him as part of the church. And for a time, for a couple hundred years, the Christian churches in Europe were mostly Franciscan churches. He was so popular. However, Franciscan church lost favor soon, and the Jesuit became the fashion. And after that, there were Dominicans, 道明会, and many others. And of course, in 1517, Martin Luther came around, and he established the Protestant church. So 基督教, 我们中国人叫它基督教, and there are many denominations. Let me just write denominations here. It is a branch of a religion, denomination. 一个派别, within the Christian churches, there are many denominations. Under Catholic Church, we just mentioned the Franciscans, the Jesuits, Dominicans, and many others. But then there's a big split between Catholic Church and the Protestants, which was led by Martin Luther. And then there are many denominations under the new Christian church. So you have Lutherans, you had Anglican churches, you had many others. I know there is one called the Mei Mei, so it's could be Miami or something. Anyway,
Methodist.
What's that?
Methodist.
A Methodist is one, yes, Methodist. Yeah, I'm really not an expert in this at all, far from it. But they are the denominations under the Protestant branch of the Christian churches. So there's the Protestants, and before them, there were the old church, and of them, the largest is the Catholic Church, and many others included Eastern Orthodox and Coptic churches. Coptic churches would include those in Egypt and Armenia, Georgia, and Ethiopia. So there are many, many branches or many denominations in the Christian church under the big umbrella, okay? But this one is a very important one. And to Chinese, we first encountered Christian religion from the missionaries in the 16th century because of Matteo Ricci. However, in the 100 years before that, Christian churches did come to China, but not very much so. We had a seed. I couldn't come up with the word. It's a tablet, 一个石碑. If you go to Xi'an to the forest of tablets, 就是碑林, and there is one very, very old one that says 大秦景教流行中国碑. It means Christian churches, missionary did come to China. Early, about close to 1,000 years before Matteo Ricci, but they came from the land, from the Silk Road. This is totally different from the Jesuits missionaries coming from the sea after Matteo Ricci. Okay. So I have a picture of Loyola. This is Loyola. He, I don't know if he's, he's a Spanish, but he went to battles. He was a soldier, and then he had some kind of revelation, and he decided to found this Jesuit society, and he went to France with several of his friends, like 6 of his friends, and together they founded this Society of Jesus. So he himself is Spanish, Loyola. He's a Catholic priest who, with Peter Faber and Francis Xavier, founded the religious order of the Society of Jesus. Xavier is also probably a French priest, but he came to, for example, Malacca, Malaysia. When I went to Maliujia, there was a church with Francis Xavier's statue outside. And they also preached in India. So they went to India, to Malaysia, and Matteo Ricci himself came to China after he landed in Macau. These are how they progress in their pursuit of their missionary mission, okay? So this order was established in 1541. And Matteo Ricci was born a little bit after that, 1552. He's called Li Ma Dou by Chinese. And he died in 1610. And he was the first foreign missionary to be able to go into the Forbidden City in Beijing to see the Emperor of China. Here is a statue of Matteo Ricci in Macau, 澳门的一个雕像, because he was there in 1582. And he became the first European to enter the Forbidden City of Beijing in 1601 when he was invited by the emperor. The emperor was not really interested in his religion, but he recognized Matteo Ricci's ability in astronomy and science, his knowledge of Western science. The Wanli emperor used this missionary to be his court astronomer and to advise him to reform the calendar. Yeah, our Chinese calendar is very complicated and not identical to the Western one. And throughout the centuries, Chinese calendar went through many reforms or reformation. So the emperor decided that this foreigner who came here to preach is a good source of information for astronomy and calendrical science. So that's what he is interested in, okay? Now, Matteo Ricci is considered a servant of God by the Catholic Church. He converted several prominent Chinese officials to Catholicism. Among them, the most famous is Xu Guangqi. There are quite a few of them, but Xu Guangqi, who happens to be a traditional Chinese scholar, philosopher, as well as a scientist and maybe mathematician and other sciences. He hit it off with Matteo Ricci, and together they translated books one way and the other way, by which I mean that together they translated Euclid's elements, 几何原理 elements of geography. No, not geography, geometry. Geometry 是几何学. So it was written by Euclid, 就是欧几里得德. So it was, I presume, written in Greek, 希腊文写的. But Matteo Ricci, he introduced Xu Guangqi to read the 几何原理或者几何原本, called the elements of geometry in English. So together they translated that into Chinese for the first time in history. China had a long history of very advanced mathematics, but there are things that were done by the Greek scientists or mathematicians that were not found in China. So this book is very important to introduce geometry to China. On the other hand, Xu Guangqi also introduced Confucian classics to Matteo Ricci, and that's why they translated Confucian classics, 中国的经五经四书五经这个经叫做 classics 古典的文书书 for the first time in history. These are all very, very important things in the cultural exchange between the two worlds. Matteo Ricci also made this very old map. It was done in 1602, combining his Western knowledge of the map of the world with Chinese knowledge of geography in the world. So this is a pretty good map of the whole world. You can see just about all the major parts correctly, but the minor parts are not really quite correct. But this is called the 昆语万国全图. This is a very important thing in the world. You know that Columbus went west trying to find China and India. He was looking for India, going west. Why is he going west? Because he found a map before Martel Ricci, apparently. He found the Americas in 1492. But before he left, he got hold of a map in Venice. At that time, Venice was a huge empire, 很大的威尼斯帝国. Venice, there were lots of ships going out of Venice to trade merchandise with India, with the Arabia, and even China. And somehow they got hold of a map drawn by Chinese. And Columbus found this map in Venice, or maybe he did not go there, but this map came out from Venice, and he realized that if you go the other way, you can also reach China and India. So that is a very important map that changed the world, which Columbus saw. And of course, other people also saw that. So people gradually, for 100 years after Columbus, they improved on the old map, and Martel Ricci was able to draw this map in 1602. The next word is contest. The contest has many meanings. Most of all, it means the circumstances or the surroundings, the environment, the background or settings that determine a certain thing. For example, a wife and a husband was having a fight. Why did it happen? You have to look into the context. Maybe he said something, she said something, or something happened. Without knowing the background, it's really hard for a policeman to say you are right or you are wrong. 清官难断家务事. So you have to find out the background. Why something happened? Because there are all sorts of reasons and the background information and circumstances. This is what the word context means. There's an example. In what context did your attack on him happen? That is what I'm asking one of the two people who had a fight. I would ask one of them, in what context did your attack on him happen? 就是到底你跟他为什么打起来的? Context is the text in which a word or passage appears and which helps ascertain its meaning. So there could be a narrative that you read, and as you read, you realize the reason behind it. So the part of the text that make you sure what it was all about is the context. So there's an example underneath that says, without any context, I can't tell you if the dish refers to the food or the thing you eat it on. So if you say the dish, then the other person could not grasp what you mean by the dish. Are you talking about the dish of fish, the dish of meat or vegetables, or are you talking about the plate that the food is on? So you need to know the context in order to decide what the person means by a certain word. So context can mean that the surrounding information that clarifies the meaning of the text. So we often say you're taking my words out of context. This is especially in politics. A lot of people were saying things, and then other people would say, he said this is, and apparently it is out of context. So you have to take out a quote and understand the context in order to explain it in the correct way. If you take it out of context, then you could be totally making a wrong statement. For example, a person, say a president or somebody, he was saying, this is whatever. And he could say, now I say this is this, but I don't agree with that. So if you take the entire thing into consideration, he doesn't agree with this, even though he did say this is this way. That is not what he meant. So that is when you take a person's meaning out of context. This is a very important word. You need to try to use it in different ways. One way is you Google, you put a word, say context, and you say in a sentence, then you will find many, many sentences that uses this word, So you can try to learn different ways to use a certain word. This is one way, one of millions of ways to use Google or to check things online. Another way is you can say context, pronounce or pronunciation, then it'll give you many sites that teach you how to read a word. And you can say the difference between this and that, and your computer will tell you many, many correct ways to tell the difference between two similar words. For example, the difference between the cheetah and the leopard. They all look like a big cat with dots on the skin. But if you go on Google and say the difference between cheetah and the leopard, then they will tell you this is bigger, this is skinnier, then this has dots that are just spots, and the other one has a spot that is broken up like a broken patch. So anything you could not tell the difference, you can Google and ask the difference between some and some, and you will get the answer. The next word is seminal. Seminal comes from the word seed or semen. Seed is the seeds of a plant, and the semen is a 精子 of an animal. So that the adjective seminal coming from these two words means 开创性的, original. It means creative or having the power to originate. And it became very important because of that. So it becomes, the meaning becomes highly influential, especially in some original way. That's what this word means. So when people say this thing is seminal, they can just mean it's very important, it is very original or very creative, or it has many meanings more than being important. It's alone. And idiosyncrasy is a similar word that we came across last time along with the word seminal. It means unique characteristic. A person can do things in a way that is very much like him or unlike other people. So we can use the word idiosyncrasy to mean he has a very unique and special way of doing things. That is, a peculiarity. Yeah, or we can use the word peculiarity to mean it is very different from others. Hostile is from the word hostility, or hostility is from the word hostile. There are many words ending with ILE, and people have two ways to pronounce them. So hostile or hostile, fertilize or fertile or fertile, or futile or futile. There are about equal number of people using one way or the other to pronounce these words. And hostile means to harbor the feeling of being an enemy. 就是it's from the word enemy. Or harboring a bad feeling or hatred or some aggressive antagonistic 是表示是对立的意思哈 unwilling 就是不听话哈 okay, so all these are hostile, and you can use hostility as a noun. We talked about the Revelation last time. The Revelation is the last book of the Christian Bible. The Christian Bible has the older part and the newer part. So you have the Old Testament 是旧约圣经哈 or the New Testament 是新约圣经 Testament is like book, but it's especially used to for Bible. When you talk about Bible, you have the New Testament and the Old Testament, and there are altogether now 66 books combined in the Old and New Testament, and the Revelation is the very last book of the New Testament. So it's a final book of the entire Bible. And so it's called the 66th book of the Bible. Revelation means to reveal things to something that may be hidden, but now it is revealed to you. And if you read this book, it is full of strange things. You don't know what it means. So this is either telling the past history or telling the future. There are different people, different scholars who thinks what this book is about, but no one can be sure. I mean, they could be sure, but they could not convince everyone else that this is what they thought it was. So the book is called the Book of Revelation, and it's also called the Apocalypse. Apocalypse is very a kind of book or narrative or saying about something, usually about the future. So currently most people could not understand its meaning because things have not happened yet. The title is the title is Apocalypse, but it translated into English is called the Revelation, and into Chinese it's 启示录, and it means in the Greek text unveiling or revelation, 就是告诉你以后会发生的事. But some people think 它是告诉你以前发生的事. There's lots of debate about that. This is the 66th book of Bible called Revelation, and it's written by John in the year 95 AD. And this John is not the John that you heard about quite often. It's not John the Baptist, who was the cousin of Jesus, who performed the baptism on Jesus， 就是施洗约翰的意思哈。St. John the Baptist was one of the very famous Johns. Another John was one of Jesus' disciples. So there was a John among the 12 people who were Jesus' disciple. I'm talking so much about Christianity because we're talking about English, and English is its history and its literature are all seeped deeply in this religion that they have. But since Henry VIII, they are no longer part of the Catholic Church. So it's called the Anglican Church. We're talking about John, and this John who wrote the Revelation was yet another John. So he is not the Baptist, and he is not one of the apostles. And he wrote this book, or this chapter, or well, every chapter in the Bible is called a book. So this is the book of Revelation. And he wrote it in the year 95, way after Jesus died. He probably died. I mean, Jesus probably died in the year 33, but we are not sure of it. And this is a book, this John of Patmos, he wrote, it's full of predictions of the spiritual realms and Jesus' return to earth. It's about the future, the spiritual world, and how Jesus came back to life, because the Christian church believed that Jesus would one day return to the earth. So John of Patmos, he wrote this book about the future. That's what most people believe, but some of them do not believe it's about the future. The author names himself as John in the text. So he sat down and wrote the book, and he says, John, I am John, and I am now in Patmos. So many people call him John of Patmos. And Patmos is a little island in the Aegean Sea, 爱琴海里面的一个小岛. I have this map. You have Italy on the left, and you have Greece in the middle, and Turkey is on the right-hand side. And the little red circle is around the island that is called Patmos. Okay, so it's in the Aegean Sea. Some people say Aegean Sea, some people say Aegean Sea. It's named after a Greek mythological god or person called Aegis. And this is an island that looks like this. And I was there in 2015, and I took many pictures. This is where John of Patmos wrote his Revelation. And this is probably a bigger monastery built after him, because he became very famous since first century. So this monastery expanded very much after him. Okay. You want to say a little bit more about the book of Revelation? It talked about very strange things, and many people interpret it in many different ways. And there are basically three types of theories. And these three words means the people who engage in this kind of thinking. And these three words you don't have to learn at all. The first word came from history. And this type of people, they think this book is about the entire history happened before. The second word came from past tense, preterite. I'm studying Spanish, and their past tense is called the Preterite. Huh? And this type of people, they think it is about what happened in the first century. This time is considered the apostolic age, 就是 when Peter and Paul and many other apostles came out of Jerusalem and tried to spread Christianity. That's the first century. And these type of people, preterists, they think the book of Revelation is talking about the first century and the fall of the Roman Empire. And the last kind of people, futurists, they are probably the majority of the scholars. They think that this book is describing the future. To say it simply, most of the scholars in the Protestant line, they would consider this as a revelation of the future. But just many in the old school would have different thoughts. And of course, I can find something about this word in the movie. The movie is called The Apocalypse Now. This is a recent enough story, a movie. I forgot to write down the year. It's probably 1992 or something like that. This is called Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse means the book of the Revelation, and it's full of weird things, and most of them are terrible. And Apocalypse Now means 现代启示录. We translate this movie into 现代启示录. It is to say this weird world predicted in the book of Revelation is happening right now. So this story contains a lot of strange things happening at that time, which is during the Vietnam War, with the American soldiers in Vietnam. Of course, they left there in 1973 or something, or 1975. But this movie came out later, but it is about the time the American soldiers were in Vietnam. And this is produced by Francis Ford Coppola. He's a famous producer and director who did the Godfather trilogy. We have Godfather, The Godfather, Godfather 2, and Godfather 3. 3 movies combined to become the Godfather trilogy. It is, I guess there's no argument that those movies were monumental, very, very good in the history of movies. And this movie was one of the movies he made, but it was less successful and full of problems. So the wife of Francis Ford Coppola made a documentary telling you about every conceivable terrible things that happened during the filming of the story of this movie. It's got Marlon Brando. That to begin with, having Marlon Brando is one way to have things running amok in your movie, because he's going to make a lot of trouble for you. Then there are Robert Duvall and then Martin Sheen. Marlon Brando played an old hero who became crazy. And Martin Sheen is a young person, while Robert Duvall is in the middle. I think he's a colonel, and Martin Sheen is a captain or something. So that's different levels. The screenplay is loosely based on the 1899 novella Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. If you know Joseph Conrad, he was a Polish person. He went to the sea to become a sailor, and eventually, of course, he traveled all through the world, including a lot of India, China, Malaysia, and so on. and he wrote many novels in English. So English is his second language because he was born Polish. And one of his very famous book, which is short, so it's called a novella, and it's called The Heart of Darkness, 黑暗的心. It's about a story of an old hero retiring in the heart of darkness, which means in the middle of Africa. Africa is called the Dark Continent. This is to describe a person who was once a very famous and popular hero. How did he become crazy and hidden in the heart of darkness? It's a very intriguing story, but Francis Ford Coppola, he decided to turn that story into with the Vietnam War as a background. So it's totally different from the old story, but it's loosely based on the novella. Yeah, Joseph Conrad is one of my favorite novelists. And if you are looking for some novels to read, you cannot go wrong with reading some of his books. They're very entertaining, philosophical, and as a Polish person writing in English, he is not going to cause you to have big trouble in reading it in English because he himself is a foreigner. Okay. The next one is the Divine Comedy by Dante. Nowadays, we just call him Dante, and he's Dan Ding. But his real name is Dante Alighieri. When a person becomes so famous that he is known as his first name only, then he's really made it. Everybody calls him by his first name, just like Madonna or Elvis. People just don't have to mention their last name anymore because they're very famous. He started to write this book, which is a narrative poem, which means it's a story, but all the lines rhyme. 是一个诗，很长的叙述诗。And they rhyme. So it's really, really hard to write such a very long book. And you can find it for free on Amazon. And there are other places you can also find free books. In the old days before Amazon, I used to go to Gutenberg.org. Gutenberg is the German person who invented the moving type printing press. 发明活字版的德国人哈 when he was born in I forgot. Okay, he was born in a city between Germany and France, so it's part of Alsace. When we were in school, we were told there was a province called the Alsace and the Lorraine. There are two such provinces, and they were between France and Germany. And every time they have a war, these two provinces would become to one side and then to the other side, and they were back and forth between two countries. And Gutenberg was born in that town. You can easily find it. I just suddenly forgot, but I was in that town, and there was a statue of Gutenberg. The people think that he was German, but right now the town belonged to France now. I was talking about Gutenberg.org. That is a site where you can find many, many old books for free in English. Okay, later on they also expanded to other languages. However, once you had Amazon, it's so much easier because the ebook forms are very easy for people to read page after page after page after page, and you could search and you could highlight and you could go back forth. So with that, with more function available in Amazon ebooks, there's no need for you to go to Gutenberg.org. Another source would be go to Wikipedia. They have a portion called wikisource.org, and many old books you can find the entire text there. And I like that very, very much because it has not only a lot of Chinese text, anything you can think of is probably in there, wikisource.org. Not only does it have a lot of Chinese, but you can find it in traditional font instead of the simplified form. Nowadays, when you Google, you always find the simplified form first. It's very hard to find the traditional fonts anymore. 10 or 20 years ago, when you search, lots of traditional text would come out, but nowadays it's not easy. Even after I refine this search to advanced search with traditional font, it still doesn't come out good. So it's I either find it in simplified form or and then I go ahead and change every word into the correct font, or I go to Wikisource and I could find it in its entirety in traditional form. So that's a bit I want to let you know about. So Dante, he wrote this book, and it is considered a preeminent, that means 非常非常的杰出的 work in Italian literature, and one of the greatest works of world literature. I will have to confess that it's very hard to read. It is very, very long, and you just pretty soon you lost your interest. There's another thing I want to talk about right now because of this, that is the audio book. Now you can find not only the hard copy or the e-copy, you can also find it audiobooks. And recently, maybe 2 months ago, I heard my first audiobook. Well, I did hear a little bits of here and there. I heard the biography of Stephen Job when I was sitting with my niece in the car. My sister and I and her daughter would drive us to visit another daughter, and on the way, the niece that was driving would listen to the biography of Stephen Jobs. So I did hear a little bit of the audiobook. But 2 months ago, I heard the entire book of a book that Dr. Chen suggested for his book club. It is a magical something life, or it's about a doctor who was a brain doctor, and she had a very severe stroke when she was 37 years old that causes her to lose every function you could think of. She could not walk, she could not speak, she could not read, she could not do anything. And somehow, with the help of her mother, she was able to rehab, to get all the functions restored. It was an amazing story. And when I tried to borrow this book from the library, they were out of the hard copy and they were out of the ebook but they only had the audio version available. So I borrowed that. And that was a godsend to me, because listening to an audio book, you don't have to flip the pages. You could be walking around and you hear it, and you don't have to really concentrate on it. You just hear, and when you miss something, it's gone. So it says this book is 5 hours long, and it is 5 hours long. So in 5 hours, you read the whole book, even though you missed many parts of it. And for a book that you really did not have to know so much about, having an audiobook is just a godsend. It's so good, because in 5 hours, you're done. It's almost as fast as a 2-hour movie. Okay, so these are the choices. You could read a book. You can do an audio book, which you can also buy from Amazon and other places, or you can you can borrow from the library. Nowadays, the library have movies and books and the CDs and books that you can borrow instantly. You just click a button and it comes to your computer immediately. You can read it or watch it. It's that fast. If you haven't been to a library, I always wanted to persuade people to use their library. It is very convenient and it's very cheap because it's free. In Seattle, there used to be a nickel fine if you are late returning your book, but now they abandoned that system. You don't have to return it on time. You can return it anytime and there will be no fine. Okay, this is not to tell you that you don't have to return the book. It is just that they trust you. They think you will return it if you are able to, even though it could be a little late. So this is one very great book, and if you cannot read it, you can just read the entry in the Wikipedia, or at least you can get an idea of what it was about. Or you can go to Sparks book, or what's the other one? Cliff's Notes. Cliff's Notes was the original book or series of books that helps high school children in reading. So the teacher would assign you to read this and you did not have the time to read. So you read the Cliff's Notes. And now there is another website called the Spark Notes, and they do similar things. You can read about books that are hard to read, or you can read novels or poems. It's a short, much shorter version of those books or poems. So it's a quick way to learn things for high school students. This I already told you about this. It's written about his journey afterlife, going through Inferno, Purgatorio, and the Paradiso. These are in Italian language. And Dante Alighieri, he was born in Florence. I was in Florence and I had a picture of on the wall, on the building that says he used to live here. Okay. Maybe I'll find it. I forgot to find the picture for you. I do have that. Okay, so he wrote it in the language that is his native language. It is Tuscan. The part of Italy called the Tuscany is where Dante was born. So this part, Tuscany, it's a beautiful part of the country with wine and beautiful farmland. So he used his own language to write this book. As a result, the Italian written language became standardized because of his book, okay? That's very interesting. And in this book, he's talking about his journey. I already mentioned he started the journey accompanied by the famous poet Virgil. And halfway through, he was accompanied by a beautiful woman called Beatrice. That was not his wife, but his girlfriend, I believe. So he was on this journey with one person or another. Throughout this journey, he went through the Infernal, Purgatorial, and the Paradiso. The next book is Milton's Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is an epic poem. It's a poem in English, but it is the story about Adam and Eve. I think it's about Adam then. It's about how Adam and Eve was punished and banished out of the Garden of Eden because of the Satan disguised as a serpent, tempting them to eat the forbidden fruit. So you have Dante's Divine Comedy and Milton's Paradise Lost. They were both very, very religious, and they became so popular that people took them as if the church, the Christian church, is all about these two books. They learned all the details they thought was in the Bible, but they were not. Okay, so both books became a very important part of the religion, but they were written much later, one in the 13 something and one in 16 something. They were more than 1,000 years after Christ. Okay, Milton is a poet who wrote many, many poems, but this one is far more important than other books. He also wrote Paradise Gained, but far more people read Paradise Lost than reading Paradise Gained. So it's an epic poem, which means it's a long story about a hero. 我们中文叫的史诗。It was published in 1667 and the second version 1674. It is considered to be Milton's masterpiece. Milton is in the time of Henry VIII, the time of Thomas More, and a little later, the time of Elizabeth I. Let me see. Yeah, it is actually the Elizabeth I, and even later. Yeah, okay, it is Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I was the ruler of England during the time of William Shakespeare. So it was a time when England burst onto the world scene and it became a superpower under the rule of a woman. And at the same time, the country flourished economically, and with Shakespeare and Milton, it became a superpower in literature as well. So he is one of John Milton is one of the greatest English poet of his time. At that time, the country is called England. We understand in 1702, it becomes a British Empire. And much later, it became, during Queen Victoria's time, it became the United Kingdom. But during Milton's time, the country is still called England. The story is about the fall of man, 就是人类怎么样堕落了, How did they lost the favor of God because they were seduced by this fallen angel Satan. and they were chased or banished out of the Garden of Eden. The next book is much less more important, but still very, very popular. It's called The Cyrano de Bergerac. It's a French novel. It is a French stage play, and it is about a person called the Cyrano de Bergerac. This person is a novelist and a poet and so on. But this play was written by Edmond Rostand. And this play is called the Cyrano de Bergerac. And in Chinese, I've heard that it was called 大鼻子情圣. But when I checked Wikipedia, it was translated as 风流剑客. So he is some kind of sword fencer, and he is very romantic. I wouldn't say he is a womanizer, because in this play, which is more or less loosely based on the story of the poet Cyrano de Bergerac, but it's not exactly a biography. And in this story, he is a very ugly person. Notably, he has a terribly ugly big nose. That's why the 大鼻子 came about. And he was an ugly poet who writes very, very well. And he knows this person who loved a beautiful young lady called Roxanne. And our hero, Cyrano de Bergerac, also secretly loved the same young lady. But his friend came to him asking him to write love letters to this girl. So even though it's painful for him, out of friendship, he continued to write many, many love letters signed by his friend, sent out to his beloved lady. And this girl, when she talked to the letter sender, she would sometimes say, I wish you would behave more than the person who wrote these letters. You wrote so beautifully, but you're not quite that person, I believe. Well, she did not suspect that, but she said, you're just not what I expected when I read your letters. So this is a very famous stage play, and it's French, and it's about a real novelist, but it's experiencing a renaissance. Lots of movies and plays and stories came out after the 1970s based on this story. So this story is simply a person, ugly person who can writing love letters for his friend to woo a beautiful young girl. So based on this story, you can make a lot of different movies. For example, one of them, Cyrano is a computer. And in one of them, he was a high school boy or whatever. There are lots of versions that change the background, but using the similar stories. And I have 3 slides here full of movies that were based on this one, but there are too many. I deleted a few that I could not come up with the meaning. And I highlighted the more famous actors in red, so you can see that how many people actually appeared in this kind of story. We have one in 1945 with Jennifer Jones and Joseph Cotton. These were the very famous actors at that time, and the screenplay was adapted by Ayn Rand, who is a very famous right-wing writer. She was a Russian Jew, came to America, and she was loved by many, many Republicans, including Donald Trump. And the next one is a French. Since it's a French story, it was adopted into many French movies. This one is starring Claude Dauphin. And the most famous of all of them is the 1950 movie. It was the protagonist, the main actor, the main role was played by Jose Farrell, who won an Oscar for it as the best actor. So when you talk about the hundreds of movies that came from this story, still most people would remember Jose Farrell in this movie because it was very good. And there was a movie called The Life of an Expert Swordsman with San Chuan Minglang playing the samurai who was this swordsman in 1959, San Chuan Minglang. And Christopher Plummer, who was in The Sound of Music, was in one version in 1962. And Jose Farrell, who won an Oscar for it in 50, he was again in another Cyrano movie with the title The Cyrano and the D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan is the Sanjianke, the youngest musketeer who befriends the three musketeers. Sanjianke is the story about D'Artagnan, who is not one of the three musketeers, okay? So this strange movie was titled The Cyrano and D'Artagnan, so we could imagine what it was about. It has to be different from the original. And the second slide shows Peter Donat. And in 1984, Cyrano was played by a personal computer. And in 1985, he was played by Derek Jacobi. And Derek Jacobi is a very respected English actor who was considered the best Hamlet in history. So there must be hundreds of people playing Hamlet in Shakespeare's Hamlet, but they all consider Derek Jacobi to be the best. So you can imagine how good he was. And then in our lifetime, we also heard of Roxanne, which is the name of the beautiful young girl. And this movie was, the Cyrano in this movie was played by Steve Martin with Daryl Hannah playing Roxanne. And of course, they all have to have a big, big nose stuck on them when they play this role. And the French movie with Gérard Depardieu, last time I was having difficulty coming up with his name. He was a big French actor in this movie in 1990. And then in 2008, we had Calvin Klein. And there are other newer versions with a present day as a background. And there is an Indian movie in 2014. We already had a Japanese one earlier in 1959. And there are other movies like this one in 2020. It's about a homosexual Chinese American girl playing that role, I guess. So that's a twist. And the latest twist is how we came to this. It is because Peter Dinklage was in this current, I think it was to be released on March 5th or something. This brand new Cyrano movie had Peter Dinklage not with a big nose, but as a dwarf, because he is a dwarf. Okay, then we would come to the word dwarf later. Okay, the word perspective has many ways to be used. Perspective is how you see something as a three-dimensional thing. So when you look at it, you could see that you were looking at it from a point here at this point That's marked with a little circle here, okay? So you look at it, you can see this three-dimensional cube from your angle. You are looking this way, okay? But if you go to another side, up or down and here and there, you would see the same thing differently, okay? So this is what is called the perspective because of the way you look at it. A view, vista, or outlook, or the appearance of the depths in object. That is, a thing should not be looked at as one-dimensional or two-dimensional. It is actually almost everything in the world is a three-dimensional thing to us. But when we look at it and we present it in books, it became two-dimensional. But you have to realize that it is actually a three-dimensional thing. That's why it's called the perspective. That is to look at something in a three-dimensional way. And as a result, the word perspective becomes from your own special viewpoint. So it can be a choice of a single angle or point of view. So when you look at one thing, everyone can have a different perspective depending on where they come from, what's their background, where they stand, or how they measure things. So this is the complexity of the perspective of things. So we often use this word this way. We can say from my the perspective, that is, from my point of view, I can see and I assume this is this way. Or you can say from a different perspective, that is, from someone else's point of view, they could see the same thing differently. That's how you can use this word differently. And this word is dwarf. Usually it's defined as person about the height of 122 centimeters. And in the English system, it's about 4 feet 0 inches. So even if you are pretty short, like Deng Xiaoping, you're still not a dwarf. You have to be shorter than that. For a dwarf person, there are two types. One is disproportionate. That means you are short, but you are not exactly in the same proportion as a taller person. You are shorter, most often you are shorter with your arms and legs. You have shorter legs and shorter arms, but more normal sized body and head. So this is one kind of dwarfism. It's disproportionate dwarfism. Another type is a proportionate dwarfism. That is, you're just a smaller version of a regular person that do not appear to have shorter legs and shorter arms. And usually a dwarf person is just as intelligent as a normal person, and they usually have nearly the same normal life expectancy. So even though they're short, they are not there necessarily having a shorter life expectancy means live a shorter life. They're saying this because there are people who are giants, and the giants are usually, they don't live as long as regular people. If you have seen The Princess Bride, the movie The Princess Bride, there is a giant in it. His name is Andre the Giant. That's his name. And he was very big in that movie. You can see it, but he passed away when he was relatively young, because usually a giant person would die sooner. This is kind of a genetic disorder. There are often people who are shorter than usual. and most of the time they have shorter limbs. And another type of person who are short is because their growth hormone is lacking. They have a deficiency in growth hormone. 他们的I think it's probably pituitary. I don't know. 松果腺 in the brain that controls growth, and there did not secrete enough of that hormone, so this person would be shorter because of the lack of growth hormone. And in order to treat this kind of person, you can use growth hormone, but it depends the reason. If you are the genetically short person, then maybe you cannot be treated by this because you would have shorter legs. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on this, but the treatment differs. I do know somebody whose son, whom I've never seen, he said his son was short and he was treated with growth hormone. And when he was 20 years old, or 25, between 20 and 25, his son grew up a great deal, much more than others, and become very tall because he was going through some treatment. And for this kind of people, they are usually ridiculed in school by other children because they're short and different from others. The schoolmates, other children who are very cruel and impolite, would discriminate against them. Even when they grow up to be adult, they're discriminated. And there are support groups. Support groups are groups of people who are inflicted by the same problem. So they get together to talk to each other, so they feel there are people like them and they feel better, and they also exchange information about how to deal with the situations that happened because of this problem. You could be a cancer patient and you could join a cancer patient support group, because these people are often being discriminated against and often have certain problems that other people don't have. Gee, we need to be quicker, okay? And now, yes?
Is there any difference between midget and dwarf?
That's what this slide is all about. It says
Sorry.
dwarfism is an acceptable term to these short people. If you call them a dwarf, it is okay. You can call them a dwarf, you can call them little people, or you can call them person of short stature. These are acceptable terms when you encounter a dwarf. However, midget is gradually becoming an offensive term. Midget also means a short person, but it has a derogatory meaning that they did not like. So nowadays, people would try to avoid using the word midget because it seems to be poking fun or to look down upon these people. Here I have this word glacier calving, and in Google Translate, it says 冰川产毒. That is a very funny way to translate it. It is for a glacier, 冰河或者冰川, to give birth to a small version of it. And the verb used is calving. Calving is a big cow giving birth to a baby cow. The baby cow is called a calf. C-A-L-F. So giving birth is called calving. And for a glacier to give birth to a little one, that is the glacier is a huge pack of ice, and from time to time, a little piece will break off, and that is when we say the glacier is giving birth to a baby glacier. So we say the glacier is calving. And this is a picture I took in Glacier Bay, Alaska on a cruise ship. And of course, I could not catch the moment that it fell. It's only after it fell in the water, this little bit tells you that there was a bit of ice on this glacier that broke off, but this is a bad picture. So I went on Wikipedia and got a series of 4 pictures. So if you go to Wikipedia, you will be able to find this picture. Then the ice starts to break off, and it broke off further down. And now when it's all gone, you just see some spray of water. And now there's no baby glacier anymore because it's in the water. There are other videos in Wikipedia or in other places you can find. They are even better than this picture. A meteorite is something that was flying in the outer space, and because it passes close to a heavenly body like the moon or the earth, it was drawn to this bigger piece of rock, which is the earth or the moon. And it finally came down and hit it on the earth or moon or any other thing. So it is like a comet or an asteroid, but it eventually falls into a large object, large heavenly body. So 是一个陨石. You can see things in the sky like a comet or asteroid or meteor, but once they came down, you can just pick up the pieces or it's totally disintegrated. Then that is called a meteorite instead of a meteor. That is something that finally survived its passage to the earth or somewhere else. And the reason it sort of dissipated is because the earth has air that provides friction, or there are pressures from some other sources or chemical interaction that all cause this piece of rock to become less and less. So when a meteor came into the atmosphere, you can see a trajectory behind it, shining light behind it. It's because parts of it was burning up. The friction of the air caused it to become gas or burned into ashes. So these are also called shooting star or falling star when they were on the journey to the earth. And there are 3 kinds of meteorites. They are either made of stone or iron or stone iron. So these are lots of different kinds of rocks that people discovered on the earth. And they were made of either stone or silica, or made of iron, or a mixture of those. And from this remains of the meteorite, the scientists could tell it was from a rock like 200,000 years ago or 30,000. There are dates attached to each of these meteorites, and they're usually very old. And here's the word relent. We more often than relent, we use the word relentless. We often say this person is relentless, and we do not often say this person relented, not as often as the word relentless. Relentless means very aggressive and ruthless, while relent means to become lesser severe or less intense or less cruel, less harsh, to soften in temper, and so on. This is what relent means, and relentless meaning the opposite. And the Bahama is a group of islands in the Caribbean. The Caribbean, if you use this map, this is Bahamas, and the Caribbean is the entire thing. This thing is a big ocean or sea between America, Mexico, and the Central America, and the northern South America. So this area is a sea called the Caribbean Sea, and the Bahamas is toward the northern part of it. Okay, and of course, first Christopher Columbus landed here in 1492, but the Spanish government that sponsored Columbus moved on to other places, mainly to Jamaica, to Haiti, and to Panama and the Colombia and the Peru and so on and so forth. They move on to many other areas in the Americas, even though Columbus landed on the Bahamas first. And Bahama was inhabited by indigenous American Indian people, and this tribe is called the Lucayans. And there are 700 islands in this country, but it became British colony in 1718, and it became independent in 1973. When we say a banner year, last time we were talking about Sidney Poitier, he had the banner year in 1967 when 3 of his blockbuster movies were released: To Serve With Love, In the Heat of the Night, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Those were the 3 of his most important or popular movies. They all came out in the same year, so we say he had the banner year. If you are a wine maker, a vineyard, and there was a certain year that the wine had the best quality, you can say you had a banner year. And if you are a sports team, you had a very successful year, winning many games, and eventually you won the World Series or whatever sport you were in, then you could say that you had a banner year. So it can be used in many different situations. Tribute, we can pay tribute to somebody to say wonderful things about a person, but this person may or may not be dead. And if you say a eulogy, it's usually after he's dead. When you say tribute, it may not be after a person died. And the tribute can also be a gift from a lower person or group of people to a higher group of people. For example, China had lots of neighboring countries that are smaller, and in order for them to feel they were protected, and in order for them to have a guarantee that China would not invade them, they would come every year to pay a tribute. They would give the best thing that they produce to seek favor from the Emperor of China. That is a tribute. And the last word is an alchemist. Alchemist is a person who practice a kind of natural scientific experiment to make miracles happen. By that I mean they would claim to make lead into gold, or they would make some miracle happen, or they would make some kind of medicine that would cure all the serious diseases. In the Western culture, this kind of natural philosophers are called an alchemist. 就是说他是一个炼金术士。Basically, they were looking to turn regular metal into gold, or they're trying to make some kind of medicine that would cure every disease you can think of. And in China, we have a different tradition, and we have Taoist priests, or monks or such things. The person who specializes in Taoism, often they are into a lot of things that a Western alchemist would do. For example, they would try to make metal into gold, or they would create or refine some kind of medicine in order to give you a long life, or you will never die if you take that medicine. So even though we're following, Western and Eastern alchemists were following different routes, they are pursuing similar things. So we can call them alchemists. So noble metal means gold or silver, and base metal means regular metal, such as lead. And the medicine that could cure difficult diseases can be called elixir or panacea. Panacea more often means it can cure all kinds of diseases, while elixir means it can give you youth forever. You will never die, okay? So these are the words that involves this alchemist. And in the Western tradition, alchemist tradition, they also have this concept of philosopher's stone. It also concerns these projects like panaceas or making gold out of lead and things like that. And if you're a fan of Harry Potter, there is one of the Harry Potter books that's called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. That's the book on the left. While on the right is a poster for the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone movie, okay? So Harry Potter is essentially a magician or an alchemist, or I don't know. There are quite a few other words as well, huh? And this slide is about European and Chinese alchemy. So we're on different tracks, but we're doing similar things. And let's go to this song, which is When the River Meets the Sea. Let me see if I could start. Could not find it. Okay, I'll have to do it myself. I thought I got it. Oh, okay, it's here. Okay, so I am here and I'm trying to share. Okay, do you see it now?
When the mountain touches the valley, all the clouds are taught to fly. Thus our souls will leave this land most peacefully. Though our minds be filled with questions, in our hearts we'll understand when the river meets the sea.
Like a flower that has blossomed into dry and barren sand, we are born and born again most gracefully. Thus the winds of time will take us with a sure and steady hand when the river meets the sea. Patience, my brothers, and patience, my son, in that sweet and final hour, truth and justice will be done.
Like a baby when it is sleeping in its loving mother's arms. What a newborn baby dreams is a mystery.
But his life will find a purpose, and in time he'll understand when the river meets the sea. When the river meets the almighty sea.
It says by John Denver, but the first part was not sung by John Denver. It was by a Muppet called the Otter. Let me see. Okay. The lyrics are pretty simple. It just say when the river meets the sea, meaning when the person dies. And it's not a horrible thing, and it's going to come, and people need to be prepared and feel calm about it. Here it used some beautiful words like, when the mountain touches the valley, all the clouds are taught to fly. This is very imaginative. And here I highlighted the word it because it's talking about the baby. When we say a baby, we don't say he or she, we say it. Make sure you use the word it when you mention a baby, because it's not particularly a boy or a girl, but it. There are many other versions of this song. I always try to find one that has lyrics, but I could not find any. So I just chose this one because John Denver has a better voice than the Otters. It was originally sung by Emmett and the mother Alice Otter. They were two Muppets in the Muppet Show. And it's Emmett and mother Alice. That means Emmett's mother. And John Denver sang that song we just heard with a Muppet who started in the beginning. And if you look harder, you can find another version of this song, which was performed by Jerry Nelson and Louise Gold at Jim Henson's memorial. We're going to talk about Jim Henson, who created the Muppets. And when he died, at his memorial, they sang this song with two people involved in this Muppet version of the song. So this song was written for Jim Henson's TV special, which is called the Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. So it's a Christmas special, but it is not about Christmas. It is just a very calm song to introduce death to little children. It has the feeling of being a Christian song. The way it's written, it's very much like a Christian song, but it did not say anything about God or Christ or anything else. It's just about a phase of human being passing from living into death. And it was sung by an otter and his mother. Later on, they had a John Denver version. Then John Denver was singing with Robin the Frog. Okay, Robin the Frog is another frog other than Kermit the Frog, who was more important in the Muppet Show. This version that was sung at Jim Henson's memorial service was performed by the Muppeteer who used to provide the voice for Emmett Otter and Robin the Frog. So it was really his job to sing his part of this song. And another person is Louise Gold. And this is a picture of Jim Henson with a lot of Muppets, and there are a lot more Muppets than this. He created many puppets home together. He called them Muppets. It's a word invented by him, I suppose. And this is Kermit the Frog instead of the other Robin the Frog mentioned above. But this is Kermit, and he is green. I read about the story about they were going to make a new Kermit, but they could not find the same fabric anymore. They had to ask around and beg somebody to produce the same kind of fabric so that they could make the same frog. So people whole world over were familiar with what this frog looked like. So they must have that fabric. Jim Henson died relatively young at age 53. 1936 to 1990. He was an American puppeteer and he created the Muppets. And he was also the director of two movies, The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. He was a Muppeteer since he was in high school, and he met his future wife in college, and together they started the Jim Henson Company. And in 1969, Sesame Street hired him to be the puppeteer, and he created a whole lot of characters for Sesame Street. That's how the world got to be acquainted with all these funny creatures. Some are human, some are not, like Big Birds or Big Bird and the Frog, and Miss Piggy, and so on. There are many of them. Of course, they were manipulated by puppeteers, and their voice was provided by a person instead of, I don't know, instead of what, okay. And later on, like 8 years after he was with Sesame Street, he started the Muppet Show. So it was a different show, not in Sesame Street, with many puppets. So you would have the Frog or Miss Piggy adventures other than in the Sesame Street. And he won a lot of awards, and he died at age 53 of toxic shock syndrome. Suddenly, it's an infection. And after he died, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1991, and he was named a Disney legend in 2011. And here I am providing these two terms. When women go through menstrual period, they usually would use a menstrual pads or a tampon. And at one time in the 1970s, it was the using of tampon was linked with toxic shock syndrome. They think it causes people to have infection, and it could be very dangerous. And Jim Henson died of that, not because of these, but because of the same kind of disease called the toxic shock syndrome. Now let us talk about Lin Zhongshi. That is a poem written by a poet when he was about to die. Usually people don't know when they're going to die. With Lord Tennyson, he wrote Crossing the Bar when he thought he was going to die, but he did not until 3 years later. So to find a real Lin Zhongshi, we usually will have to find someone who was executed. Then they knew they were about to die immediately, or they lost a battle and they were going to kill themselves. So they would write a Lin Zhongshi. But otherwise, a poet can write a Lin Zhongshi looking back on his life and about the way he might die in a poem that may not be immediately before his death. And last time we read this one, who is by Tang Yin, who is also called the Tang Bohu. He is a kind of playboy kind of person, so he's taking life not seriously. But the more serious one we read was Yu Mei Ren by Li Yu. He was captured and under house arrest by the next emperor of China. He was the king of Nantang, while the next one would be Wu Dai Shi Guo Tang Song, okay, it would be Song, okay. Song dynasty emperor captured him and put him under house arrest and did not like him at all. So after Zhao Kuang-yin was dead, the next emperor wanted to kill him. He could sense that he was about to die. That's why we can consider this writing as his Lin Zhongshi. 春花秋月何时了，往事知多少。小楼昨夜又东风，故国不堪回首月明中。雕栏玉砌应犹在，只是朱颜改。问君能有几多愁？恰似一江春水向东流。And pretty soon after that, he died very suddenly, and people believe he was poisoned to death. So he had the feeling that he was about to die. As to other people who wrote Lin Zhongshi, I had these 4 people. Su Shi was about to die, but he didn't after several months. But he knew he was about to die. The other 3 people, they definitely knew they were going to die. Xiang Yu was going to kill himself when he wrote this. And the Kong Rong and the Xie Lingyun both were imprisoned and sentenced to death, and they were executed by their emperor. So all 3 of them wrote poems that can be definitely considered Lin Zhongshi. However, Su Shi is a very he being such an optimistic and a very calmed person in life, he wrote this just looking back at his life and not because he is very stressed in health and was about to die, but he did die soon after that. This is called the 自题金山画像师Su Shi died in 1101, and he was banished to Hainan Dao from 1097 to 1100 in a very primitive tropical island. Of course, he is still working as a magistrate or a mayor of some sort, but it was in the remotest place, in the worst of condition. But he was pardoned at the end of 1100. So he was pardoned. So he went on a journey back home, which took him about a year, actually, because he was pardoned in August of one year, and he died probably in August of the next year. So it took him a year, but not enough for him to go back home. He died halfway. That was the old time travel. There's not a quick way to get home. So he wrote this in 1101 after he was pardoned. He said, 心似以灰之木，深如不系之舟。问汝平生功业，黄州、惠州、儋州。Okay, and here the punchline is in the last line. He named 3 counties or districts in China where he was banished. He was banished or demoted to Huangzhou in 1079 until 1084 for 5 years. Then he went back and was regularly employed in places like Hangzhou. He was the magistrate or mayor of Hangzhou, and in other places which were big and prosperous cities. But then he was banished again in 1094 to the remote Huizhou, which is in southern Guangdong Sheng, and for 3 or 4 years. And then he was demoted again further down into Hainan Dao from 1097 to 1100. So throughout his life, the 3 periods that marked his misery in life was Huangzhou, Huizhou, Danzhou. That was the 3 times he was banished. But he looked back in his life on the bright side and he said, what did I accomplish in my life? That was the 3 periods I was banished, because he wrote wonderful poems during those periods when he was suffering, and how he managed to deal with poverty and humiliation and being away from his friends and family. He had a wife to whom he wrote 江城子10年生死两茫茫，不思量，自难忘 and so on. That's after 10 years after his wife died, and he got married in 18 or 20 or 19. Maybe he was 19, his wife was 18. Anyway, his wife died, and he had three women in his life. There were new wives and new mistresses or concubines. And when he was banished, he did not bring his wife or second wife with him, but he brought one of his concubines. So he was away from his family, probably from his sons. And I think he had a daughter, but it's not Su Xiaomei. He had several sons. And when he left, when he was going to Huangzhou, Huizhou, Danzhou, he was not able to keep his family with him. So there were years and years of misery, but he looked back and he wanted people to look at the bright side, and he think he achieved a lot more during his banishment than in the years he was in high position. Yeah, he was really in high position, but he was too smart for his own good. So he was arrogant and not very conciliatory. He was very non-cooperative and looked down upon people. That's why he often was, in our Chinese words, we would say, there are 小人尽谗言. Say people slander him to the emperor, and the emperor had to court-martial, not court-martial, had to put him through the justice system, and almost he died in 2079 due to 乌台诗案. And he really suffered a lot, but we look at what he writes, and it's really wonderful how he enjoyed life in all the misery. And this poem is called 字体金山画像诗. He was pardoned in Hainan, which is Danzhou, and he came back, and he came through Guangdong and Fuzhou and so on, and he arrived in Zhenjiang, which is in Jiangsu. In Zhenjiang, there are 3 mountains. There are Jinshan, 什么山, 什么山. I will tell you next time. There are 3 mountains in a row. One of them is Jinshan, and that's where Baishe was. I mean, the Fahai, the monk put a whole pagoda on top of Baishe in order to keep her down. That's a story between a snake and a human being. And that's the same Jinshan where Su Shi passed by. And there he saw a painting by his friend, Li Gonglin. Li Gonglin did a painting of him, and he looked at it, and he really was filled with emotion. So he wrote this little poem that we consider his, not a death wish, but a poem before he died. And he was here in Zhenjiang, and then he died in Jiangsu, Changzhou, in August. So he really was having difficulty moving from place to place because he did not progress too much. Changzhou is even to the southeast of Zhenjiang. So that's how he died. Yeah. And the Gai Xia Ge is written by Xiang Yu. This is quite famous and short and easy to memorize. 力拔山兮气盖世，时不利兮骓不逝，骓不逝兮可奈何，虞兮虞兮奈若何. He was so powerful and strong that he could pull with one hand a whole mountain, but time is not good to him, and even his horse would not run anymore, and he is faced with his favorite concubine and sighing just before he killed himself. Now, this is a very short how do you say that? Okay, 临终诗, that was his 临终诗. And he was only 25 years old when he conquered the entire China after Emperor Qin Shi Huang died, and his son and grandson succeeded him quickly in a few years. Xiang Yu was able to conquer the entire country, all 6 states, plus the 7, all 7 states at the age of 25. However, along came Liu Bang, who was wiser and more scheming and more capable of launching battles. And they fought for 4 years, and Xiang Yu eventually lost, and he killed himself by the river Wujiang. Okay, this is a story of Xiang Yu. We're not going to go through this poem, which is difficult to read, but Kong Rong, we all knew that when he was a little child, and he was given 2 pears, and he took them home and gave the bigger one to his older brother. He said, my older brother deserves a bigger pear, and I would have the smaller one. So forever, Chinese children were taught to give the bigger prize to their older brother or sister because of this example. So he was also a poet, and he wrote this before he died because he was to be executed by Cao Cao. And apparently, according to this, 浮云一百日 means he was straight and pure and full of integrity as the white sun. But all those other people were like floating dark clouds passing by and covered over him with the lies. So he succumbed to bad words from other people who said those words to Cao Cao, who was the ruler at the time, and he was executed. Okay, not only he died, his entire family was executed. And he was having the last name Kong. He was a descendant of Confucius, and he was the 20th generation grandson of Confucius. So he was 鲁国曲夫人. And that 浮云蔽白日 came from a famous 古诗19首 行行重行行. This is about a husband and wife separated by war and battles, and probably the wife was at home missing the husband. Okay. And the last one is 谢灵运 临终诗. We're not going to read either because it's complicated and not very easy to read. But 谢灵运 is a famous poet. He was a 山水诗人, and he's a grandson of 谢玄. And 谢玄 is the nephew of 谢安. All the people with the 谢last name were once belonging to this very famous clan. And we say 旧时王谢堂前燕，飞入寻常百姓家. We know Wang and Xie are 2 huge clans in Tang Dynasty, or before. Actually, this is before Tang Dynasty. But when Tang Dynasty came, they are no longer famous and rich. And the swallows that made nest in their homes are now scattered about, building new homes in other rich people's home. That's what that poem was about. It was not written by 谢灵运, of course. 谢灵运was 南朝, and that诗I just read was 乌鹊桥边野草花. That was 唐朝的诗人 thinking about the rich and famous people from Wang and the Xie dynasty are no longer with us. Okay, 谢灵运呢，他的祖父是谢玄，是谢安的侄子。He was very smart, became very famous quickly. So his grandfather was wondering, how come my son is so dumb but my son's son is so smart. That is a weird thing, huh? Okay. And Xie Lingyun's mother is the daughter of Wang Xizhi, huh? Okay. So the Xies were marrying the Wangs. They were marrying each other quite a lot of times, huh? Xie Lingyun was like Su Shi, too smart for his own good. So there are always people saying things bad about him. He was arrested many, many times. And this time was for some trumped up charges. I think it's about sexual harassment or raping or something, but I don't know the truth about it. But this time, after he was arrested and released many times in his life, this last time, the emperor decided to execute him and he died. That's why he wrote that Lin Zhongshi. Okay, this is all for today, and it lasted longer than usual. Do you have anything to say? I hope you're still there.
Still here.
We are still here. We are still here.
Yeah, we're still here.
老师，那个孔融的我没有听清楚，他的是什么那个
he was executed because people, just like Su Shi or Xie Lingyun or hundreds of very good people in Chinese history, they were so famous that other people were jealous and said things about him that made him get in trouble. So Kong Rong was one of them. He was, many people said bad things about him. And from his Lin Zhongshi, you could tell that he thought he was innocent. He should not be arrested and put in prison, let alone being executed. But he was executed by Cao Cao, and along with many members of his family. That's how it works in China. The many rich or famous or
Family executed as well too. Who? The families are executed as well. Wow.
Yes, the whole family was executed. In the old times, the emperor could decide to kill all your relations, all nine branches of the family. So all your other families, hugely extended families could be executed. And everyone is serving on the whims of the emperor because the emperor is above the law. Unlike in a democracy in China during the imperial times, the emperor decides everything. Of course, there are times they were manipulated by some bad people, but in name, all the orders came from the emperor, and you could never say anything bad about the emperor. And so it's easy to convict anybody for any crime because the emperor, you don't need any other witnesses. You don't need any proceedings. If the emperor says you're guilty, you're guilty. Okay, I'm glad we're not like that anymore, but there are other problems.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
谢谢老师。
Oh,
谢谢。
thank you.
谢谢。
Yeah, next time would be about 2 weeks from now. Yeah.
OK，
Okay.
谢谢。
谢谢。
You.